and to me directly, like the trauma of war and how it, kind of passes down through generations. That's kind of something I really wanted to talk about, but in a non-specific way, because I think it's an idea that's bigger than just my story as a daughter of a Korean immigrant. So I wanted to make up something that sort of that I could play with those ideas without being too on the nose about any reality, because I feel like the emotions are the same. But if I start talking, well, it's just like in South Korea in the 1950s or whatever, it's going to not be relatable anymore to everybody. So that's kind of how I took a long time to like formulate the mythologies, and I really am looking forward to later volumes when I'm going to be able to pick apart those ideas more, and the puzzle pieces will come together more.
Hi, I'm John Barrett Ingalls, and this is Without These Books, a thank you inspired video podcast celebrating the authors, artists, books, and characters that changed us as artists, writers, readers, and as people. This episode is made possible with support from the Orange County Community Foundation, and today we are connecting with author and illustrator Amy Kim Kibuishi, creator of the soon-to-be-released graphic novel series The Rima Chronicles from Scholastic Graphics. The first in the series, Realm of Blue Mist, will be available this April. Why don't you tell us what book you chose that inspired you at a young age?
Well, I chose A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. This is my old copy from fifth grade, and this was the cover that I read when I first read it. And yeah, I wouldn't be doing books at all if it wasn't for this one book. So when I was asked to choose, I was like, I didn't even have to think about it. I was like, Wrinkle in Time.
I feel like we had the same exact book in the fifth grade. I had that same book with that same exact cover.
It's a creepy cover.
Totally. I mean, it's something that, like, when you see it, you're either drawn in or you're completely turned away from it.
Yeah, no, I was definitely drawn in.
Um,
I just loved, go ahead.
no, please, please.
Oh, well, I mean, I just thought it was so wonderful to be reading like a fantasy book for school. It was the first time we read something that wasn't like a realistic fiction assignment, and I think that helped a lot. But I think I could just everything about it, like the escapism, the strange characters, and all the new ideas about tesseracts and everything. Like at fifth grade, it like really opened my mind.
It really was like the originator of this young adult genre, following a young adult in this kind of scientific sci-fi reality, especially being a female.
Yeah, I guess I didn't think about it that much because I was only 10 at the time. I had no comparison. So I was already watching like Gem and the Holograms, and like, there were plenty of female protagonists going around. But I think it was the first time I saw a female protagonist that I felt like she felt like me, just kind of this loner oddball that nobody understood, that was struggling with some sadness inside of her, like especially as a young person, because kids are always supposed to be happy and everything's perfect, but it's not always reality. And for someone like me who was going through a lot at the age of 10, like it really helped me get through some stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting to assign that to fifth graders at that age. I mean, Meg is a little older. I guess Charles Wallace was that age, but uh, Meg, our main character, is in high school, but we're still able to relate.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Charles Wallace is not, I don't think he's a very realistic character. I thought he was so cool. I actually have a character in my book. His name is General Raid, but he's somebody who ages like 4 times slower, and he's definitely directly inspired by Charles Wallace somewhere down the line. The idea of these people who are physically small, and everyone underestimates them, but they're mentally strong and wise beyond their years, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
You have General Raid is what, like 37, but in like a 12-year-old's body.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's very frustrated.
There are other comparisons that your story has. I've noticed as well, this kind of search for the father, the missing father who has left these breadcrumbs or um, clues to help his daughter travel to new realms and new realities, setting up her journey.
Yeah, I mean, just the idea of going through portals in general, there's just so much. Yeah, and once I started thinking about Wrinkle in Time and talking about it on this podcast, I was just like, dang, there's even like that sort of gentle old woman guide, like they had the 3 stars in A Wrinkle in Time. And I don't know, that book just really got into my subconscious. And just the idea of like that looming darkness, the being there in the background, that feeling of dread somewhere in the background, that was kind of carried through also with my story.
I just found out that A Wrinkle in Time is the first book in a series. I didn't realize it. I've only read the first book, but it is the first book in the Quintet of Time. And I get it because Madeleine Engel created such a wealth of science, of magic, of world building, character building, that it was almost too much to just be contained in one book. That it had to be a series, and the same is true with the Rima Chronicles, which obviously in the title you are setting up that this is going to be a multi-book series. Um, but what was that experience like for you? You created the Rima Nora, which is essentially the history, the lore, the laws of science of everything that happens on the planet Rima and everything that happens in your story.
Really long. Like it took literal decades, and most of it wasn't like focused. I was just kind of like, I'd read, I don't know, like Carl Sagan's book Broca's Brain, and I'd get like these ideas, and I'd be like, what if in the fantasy setting these scientific ideas were represented in this sort of mythological way, and how would the people react on the ground, how would it influence politics in this world, and how would that trickle down to Tabby and the main characters and their life choices. And um, I feel very lucky to have grown up with a mother who is a really good storyteller. She's not really formally educated. Like at the time, she grew up in post-war South Korea. So at the time, like girls actually weren't allowed to go to school. But my mom is so smart, and she just told me so many awesome stories growing up in this sort as a wild child, almost like a feral child by the ocean. And just hearing those stories, and then also hearing the stories about what happened politically during the Korean War, and how it had a trickle down effect on my family, and to me directly, like the trauma of war and how it, kind of passes down through generations. That's kind of something I really wanted to talk about, but in a non-specific way, because I think it's an idea that's bigger than just my story as a daughter of a Korean immigrant. So I wanted to make up something that sort of that I could play with those ideas without being too on the nose about any reality, because I feel like the emotions are the same. But if I start talking, well, it's just like in South Korea in the 1950s or whatever, it's going to not be relatable anymore to everybody. So that's kind of how I took a long time to like formulate the mythologies. And I really am looking forward to later volumes when I'm going to be able to pick apart those ideas more, and the puzzle pieces will come together more. But I felt like going back to A Wrinkle in Time, that Madeleine L'Engle, I'm just assuming a lot because I actually don't know much about the background of why or how she wrote A Wrinkle in Time. But when I read that book, it felt like, because it's not like a sword and sorcery fantasy, it's like a fantasy that's drawn from either personal experience or like really deeply personal thoughts, like it's not like there's a wizard and there's a king that must battle a dragon or whatever. It's like all these like bizarre ideas, like the whole scene of the kids, the famous one of the kids bouncing the ball and Camazotz. Those are based on, I'm assuming, her real thoughts about the monotony of, suburban life. That kind of like she's making a statement there, like that kind of fantasy building, you know, was exactly what I wanted to see at that age. And it's one of those things as a kid, like you can't really say like, oh, I'm tired of watching the same old, I love Legends of Zelda, but like, at the time, they had that Legend of Zelda cartoon where it'd be like, oh, I'm fighting goblins and stuff like, yeah, I know that's fantasy and Lord of the Rings and stuff, but I wanted something more deeper and emotional, I guess, as a child. And so it really resonated me when I finally picked up Wrinkle in Time. And in fact, I loved it so much that I wanted to translate it into a comic book. I asked my teacher at the time, like, if I could do that instead of write the essay about my reaction. He was like, yeah, go ahead. So I had this idea. I was going to do the whole thing. I was going to adapt the whole thing. I got like 3 pages. Yeah, I got like 3 pages in and I couldn't do anymore. I was like, this is too hard. I can't even draw her house.
I was
Yeah.
thinking about that as what would Madeleine L'Engle have done, or how would she have approached this world building and storytelling if graphic novels were a genre back in the early 60s? Or would she have utilized an artist or illustrated herself to create these vivid worlds of Uriel and Camazotz?
Well, I mean, a colleague of mine, Hope Larson, she adapted it very nicely, like, and it's such an interesting book because every time it's adapted, it's a little different. Like the movie versions, there was like a Hallmark, I think, miniseries made, and like they're all so different. The might will be different stories, but I think it's because it just shows how personal the reading of that book is. And I found a similar issue with another book series I love, The Golden Compass.
Mhm.
Whenever that's adapted, it's also a little shaky. It's too personal. That's why, and
But so
I
you're not a
kind of
fan of the HBO series?
it's really good. I
I
think it's
think
the
it's I
best
think it's
one.
better than anything I've seen so
Yeah.
far as well.
I
Yeah.
I mean, I do wish it had a little more magic. I think it was budget reasons. Like there's not enough Pantalaimon talking for me. That was like one of my favorite things about the books. But I just think these sort of personalized fantasy mythologies types of stories are like really hard to put on the screen unless whoever is reading it can deeply relate to it. You know what I mean?
Right. See, but you have the wonderful blessing of being an artist and being able to illustrate your vision so that there's no question of what this world looks like. There's no question of what the planet of Rima looks like and the city of Siri looks like, because you've put it on the page and it's been spelled out. But I'm curious, you talk about it being in fifth grade and wanting to make comic books, but what came first for you? Was it the art side, the artist illustrator side, or was it the author? Do you consider yourself more of an artist, or do you consider yourself more of an author? If you had to add weight to one of those sides.
Um, I don't know. I can't say for sure because, and I'm somebody that doesn't like labels too much, because I feel like once I get in my mind that I am this, I am a cartoonist, for example, I don't explore things as much as if I just leave it open-ended. So in my mind, I'm just a storyteller and I end it there. But I'm stuck in comics, I think, because I spent the most amount of time perfecting that skill. I did stop drawing for about 7 years, and I wrote the Rima Chronicles as a novel with no drawings for a while, just to hash out the story and get it right, because the drawings were a bit of a distraction. But my writing is not nearly as good as my drawings. Um, but the book that's coming out now is a direct adaptation of that novelization that I made. So yeah, I don't know. They come at the same time. In this case for Rima, it started like just as a really vivid dream that I had when I was like 12 years old, and I just kept wanting to go back, and one idea like layered on top of another over the years, and I had a friend in high school that was really into the writings I was doing about this world, and she egged me on to keep doing it. And then later on in college, my friend saw some of the scattered drawings I did for it, and she was just like, "Amy, you should turn that into a comic book, and let's go to the anime conventions and sell these zines." And I'm just like, "Sure, I guess." I'm not a huge anime fan. I mean, I am, and I am not, but I was like, "Sure." And that kind of really started the comics life of the Rima Chronicles. Before that, it was mostly just ideas and novellas and things that I would just play around with. So I don't know. They all kind of happened at the same time.
I'm curious what your thoughts are. Uh, and I'm sure this answer is fairly universal, but I'd love to hear it in your language. In your story, you have this young person making these discoveries about herself. Madeleine L'Engle did the same thing in A Wrinkle of Time, and in a lot of young adult literature, there's this plot device of a person of a certain age um, having this discovery that they are the chosen one, or that they have this special gift, or that they are the only ones who can do X, Y, or Z, um, or that they are the catalyst for something great to happen. And I'd love to know what your thoughts are on why we tell these stories and why they're so important.
I mean, I think everyone goes through that phase of self-discovery and needing to branch out from their life, like a growth spurt. Basically, it's like growth spurt time. And when those times happen, a lot of us, I think, cocoon ourselves and have to go into these inner spiritual journeys. And for those people, I think books like A Wrinkle in Time and hopefully the Rima Chronicles will help them find a path that leads them into a better life. But it happens in cycles. I mean, I feel like I've had a death and a rebirth several times in my life, whether it's, I become a mom and then I have to have a death and a rebirth of my old self, at that phase, or now going back into being a career woman, I have to kind of slough off some of my old homebody tendencies and rebirth in that way. And there's different stories for that. And I mean, there'll always be a need for that. I think someone somewhere is always going to be going through something where it's not the kind of thing they can really talk about with people, that it's something that they have to go through on their own. I mean, that's why I think so many of these stories are the parents are not there, and the young person who represents, I think, somebody coming of age, more metaphorically speaking, is going off on this journey to become their full self. There's always going to be a need for that kind of fantasy.
Amy, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. It was so much fun. I am so excited to see what comes next. I burned through Realm of Blue Mist. My daughter, my 13-year-old daughter, burned through it as well, and we are both so excited to see what comes next in this story. Your book will be available later this year in April, and we're so excited to see what comes after.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Join the conversation at withoutbooks.org.